Hi, I'm Alexa Rowe with Fortinet, and today I'm joined by a special guest, Jonathan Nguyen, Vice President of Strategy here at Fortinet. We're here to talk about some changes in security and basically what CISOs are up against today. So what's working in the data center might not necessarily be working in the cloud.
Yeah.
Do CISOs need to re-architect their solution when they're moving to the cloud? What's going on there?
Sure. So let's talk about some basic things. And one thing we've seen across security is that we're not doing a really good job at it, right? Because every day, every year, we're seeing more and more data breaches and more damages associated with that. So let's talk about what we're not getting right before we think about adding more complexity and moving to cloud.
Starting with the basics.
Right. So if we're failing when we have physical access to the servers themselves and physical access to the logs, how are we going to fix detection and then response when the data and the servers are virtualized and they're in clouds, right? And so one of the things we need to look at is what are the traditional approaches that we have in security? And how do we change that moving forward, right? And how do we change that moving forward working across multiple clouds, not just one, but multiple clouds? So I think security on the first part has changed because in essence, it's really a secure remote device to cloud access issue. Because today, whether it is a private cloud or a public cloud, computing is basically cloud-based. So security falls into two elements. How do I secure the access to that computing resource into my private or public cloud? And then how do I secure those computing resources, whether it's either one? And then how do I bridge the two to have universal visibility in real time in a single pane of glass? And how do I do that so I can detect and mitigate a threat that's happening faster and faster every day? That's the real challenge. Yeah.
So Jonathan, do CISOs need to re-architect their solution when they're moving to the cloud? What's going on there?
Yeah, to a certain degree, they're going to have to consider how they apply and how to get the same look and feel across their legacy data centers, on-premise environments into cloud. And not just one cloud, but a series of public clouds, multiple service providers. How do you have that uniformity, look and feel onto a single pane of glass, right? The challenges of managing that in a traditional enterprise environment only get more complex as you begin to distribute across multiple clouds.
Many CISOs are finding themselves in these multi-cloud situations and they may not even be aware of it. How does Fortinet help solve this problem?
Yeah, I think for us, because we're in the 6th largest cloud service provider marketplaces in the industry today, and that whether it is an appliance or a virtualized form factor of that FortiGate, it's the same look and feel. And the limitless options around licensing and owning your license and bringing your own license and spinning things up, it really helps the operating team because it's the same look and feel. And so there isn't that hard transition across. And the ability to use the FortiManagers, the FortiAnalyzers, and the FortiSIMs to really bridge across all those different environments to give you a single pane of glass visibility and alerts, that's what really is going to save the day.
So what would you say to CISOs that are trading off control for convenience or cost in hopes that they're getting the adequate protection that they need?
Yeah, so traditionally CISOs, we all had to compromise between best in class and interoperability and productivity. And we said that in order to get best in class products, we had to go to multiple vendors, which led to box sprawl. And that the complexity and managing that complexity across multiple vendors and management consoles and platforms was really borne on our shoulders. But I think where we are from the technology and the maturation, especially with the Fortinet fabric, is that entire security stack is best in class, demonstrated by third-party testing and analyst results across the board. So we don't need to trade off, performance and best-in-class performance, with integrated productivity. I think you can do that all, manage your risks, measure them, balance it, but I think that type of trade-off is no longer necessary today.
And how does the customer really benefit from that?
Well, I think you get platform consolidation, right? So you get lots of efficiencies and productivities and economies of scale. You don't have to have your team trained across the multiple products. You don't have to have multiple orchestration and management consoles. So the ability to detect and understand what's happening in an integrated fashion and then to respond to that, backed up by some really good threat intelligence, begins to accelerate the time in which organizations can respond to threats.
Just basically, how could CISOs achieve in keeping them secure in a cost-effective way still?
So you nailed it, right? The word that you used were perimeters. And up to this point, there have been two strategies that we've all used. Traditional network segmentation and some trust-based approaches. Both are actually perimeter-based, right? So one says we're going to build zones based on perimeters. We're going to put a perimeter firewall, and we're going to segment. And so that we can control lateral movement and improve security. The other says that we should trust traffic no more, whether it's inside the perimeter or outside the perimeter. So what's the problem with that? Increasingly today, we don't live in static environments, static ports, static IP addresses. those no longer relevant.
We're
moving to
culture of
cloud.
movement, yeah.
So perimeters are less and less relevant, yet our traditional approaches were perimeter-based. So we need to
something
move,
has to change.
Right, so we need to move beyond that, right?
Yeah.
We need to move to an approach where we utilize the next generation firewalls, if you will, like what we just released in Fortinet. The ability to use third-party trust engines, the ability to have dynamic role-based controls and policy changes so that the segmentation rules are based upon a business outcome. And we need to move beyond implicit trust. We need to have the ability to have variable trust. So the business outcome, the business objectives should marry with the security objectives. And those should centrally around 5 points. One is that all requests for network access should be verified and validated and authenticated, right? So make sure that the device making the request is properly configured. The person making that request on that device is the right person, so you authenticate. You're going to validate that that request makes sense, that the request to access the mail server is legitimate.
Do your
right?
due diligence there.
And then you're going to monitor and log all the sessions so you can have a timestamp across that, and you can build a base level of understanding. Because once you have a base level of understanding, you can detect the anomalous behavior. What's changed, the things that telltale signs of malicious activity. And finally, you need to encrypt, right? So the one emerging standard across all the different controls in the world and frameworks and strategies, whether it's ISO or CSF or the Australian Signals Directorate ideas, the idea that you need to encrypt the data to monetize the risk, if you will. The challenge is that 78% of all the enterprise traffic is encrypted, but only 20% is inspected. So you're going to have to look at technology.
Why is that?
Well, because it's a limitation of the technologies. And when you have Fortinet's ASICs accelerated firewalls, it can process high levels of encrypted traffic and support where the enterprise needs to be. And so your choice of underlying technologies really becomes key in how you begin to apply traditional segmentation approaches and trust-based approaches in a dynamic world around digital transformation.
And we've talked a lot of topics today. What are some of your final thoughts?
My final thought is that networks are not hermetically sealed environments, right? You work with the idea that you're trying to achieve a reasonable level of due care. You know, you're never going to be 100% secure, but you can deliver a reasonable level of security. And then finally, as a word of personal advice to all CISOs and security operators, look after your health, right? The stress is always going to be there. It's going to be overwhelming. You can't let that take control of your life because you can't serve your organization. Your physical health as well. And you have to understand that level of complexity is going to be there. You know, to quote Han Solo, at some point in your career, you're going to have to let the Wookiee win, right? Because tomorrow you will come back to that and maintain the same level of approach, right? That way you don't get overwhelmed.
And speaking of Star Wars, we're going into Accelerate's coming up.
That's right.
What can give us a glimpse into what that's going to look like? Because I know we do have some Star Wars themes.
Sure, yeah. Epcot on Tuesday night and Walk of the Stormtroopers, right? Yeah.
So more to come, and we hope to see everyone there.
Lots to come.
Great. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.